Welcome to People Are the Point. I'm your host, Mark Concannon. Let's talk about the people. Thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Mark Concannon, for the podcast, People Are the Point. Today, my guest is Tyler Brown. I've been fortunate enough to know Tyler for over a decade and watch his career grow as he moved from consulting into working for Toyota, the world leader in the automotive industry. He's been charged with and succeeded in helping craft the future of automotive technology and the transition for Toyota from an automotive company to a holistic mobility solutions provider. But not only has he grown with his career, his family continues to grow and engage him at home. As a native Californian, he took on the challenge to move to Dallas, Texas, and start his family with his wonderful wife, who dedicates her life to children, both through her family with Tyler, but also by helping rehabilitate children at the Dallas Children's Hospital. Join me today as Tyler and I discuss work, life, and finding ways to make sure you put down your phone.
Yeah, moved out to Dallas, which is a new adventure for myself and my wife. We moved out here about 5 or 6 years ago from Southern California. So lots of love here, a lot of differences, but enjoying it.
Yeah, you mentioned the storm that just came through recently. That's a major difference from California.
Yeah, that I don't think I'll ever get used to. It's the storms that pop up in the spring. You know, we're at the southern end of Tornado Alley. And then it's the summers. The summers, you know, I feel how people get cabin fever up in the Midwest in the wintertime. And I think it's the same here in the summer, especially with young kids who want to be outside. And when it's 100 degrees, it's a little tough. So I miss my Southern California roots from time to time, but Dallas is a great place to live and grow a family.
Yeah, I know. I spent about 8 years out in Dallas, and I actually enjoy Four Seasons. And I find that the people are really warm, the food's great, and the barbecue's awesome. Yeah. So there's definitely some upsides.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And being a Southern California kid, it's the traffic as well. It makes things so much easier. And I know we live in a hybrid world today, but I don't miss the long commute. So you were down here in Dallas maybe for what you said?
About 8 years. Yeah, about 8 years back in early 2000s.
You've seen both geographies. Yeah.
Yeah, I always find it interesting, especially, you know, now you're with Toyota, and I know you were part of that transition out to the Plano offices from SoCal, and the folks that came with that organization will often complain about how the traffic has increased over the last, you know, whatever it's been, about a decade now. And I always find it amusing because I still, of course, spend a lot of time in LA and Seattle and Chicago and other big cities, and I do not feel like Dallas's traffic has gotten anywhere close to what those cities have to offer.
Yeah. You got to put it into a frame of reference. Yes, maybe it has got worse, but relative to other big cities, it's a breeze.
Still come out ahead.
Don't let them complain too bad. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, you mentioned the hybrid work. How have you found that works for you? Do you like better the work from home? Do you like being in the office, the hybrid working? I know Toyota hasn't enforced 5 days a week, but there's some level of come back to the office. How's that working for you, and what have you found as the pros and cons?
Yeah, great question. I'm an introvert by nature. That's how I define myself. But I find that, you know, when we went through the pandemic and now are working hybrid, that I have this like strong desire to be around people. And I think work is some of that outlet where I love to go into the office. And I think it's the times where serendipity happens, where you can have these hallway or water cooler conversations that allow you to run into a meeting room and grab a marker. And that's what I've enjoyed, I think, about this hybrid work. You know, my personal preference is a few days a week in the office. I think that's important. I think productivity for most, but not all roles, improves when you have multiple people that are your direct stakeholders or quote unquote internal customers in the office at the same time. I don't think there's any way to replace that for most businesses. Some are exceptions. But I also think it's important to kind of balance that out. What we've learned, I feel, during the pandemic is that you can still be productive at home, but it's taking the time that you need to have that personal time, to go to your kid's soccer game, to go run an errand during lunch, where you don't feel this pressure or that your boss is always watching you and as you go in and out of punching the clock. And so I feel like that relaxed nature has been really beneficial for almost everybody. But I do think there's something important about coming into the office on a regular basis. And as I've told junior people on my team, most of our executives are in the office every single day. And if you are really driven by career aspirations, it behooves you to also come into the office and to get that visibility. Because when you're on a Teams call or a Zoom call, it's just not the same. So I've really enjoyed it. We're 3 days in the office. Leaders are for our pillar. We're in the office 3 days a week, 2 days at home. You pick your three, very flexible. For the rest of the team members, it's full hybrid. They can pick whenever they'd like to come in. And I think it's worked. I do think it's worked really well.
It feels like the right balance. That's good.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the work from home, and then you mentioned the family component. So I know about the same time you transitioned out of consulting and into industry, you also started a family. And how do you find that balance? Because you absolutely have been building your career very successfully, and two daughters and a wife and a life there that's so important to you. How do you find that balance for yourself?
What I love about it is the support. Like my wife is my rock. I can go to her with any conversation about work, things I'm struggling with there, what's next in my career. And what I love is her feedback is always centered around my happiness. We will always, have an income. We will always find a way forward as a family. But she wants me to do whatever makes me the most happy. And so that's been really great to have, that I didn't always have. I've always had really great mentors, really great managers that have kind of grown me, but outside of work, I've never, had that level of support. And so that's been just a really good resource for me. I think the challenge is when kids get involved, right? And love my kids to death, but I have 2 kids that are 3 and under, and balancing this hybrid work with them coming home from daycare, napping, maybe not napping, running around the house, and to try to be present for them. I'll be honest, I haven't been great at it. I think I've struggled. I'm getting better, I think. But what I'm trying to prioritize this year is just to how to separate the 2 worlds, because I can get very lost at work when I'm in work and sometimes bring that home. And with this always on kind of hybrid work culture, I need to be better about removing myself mentally from thinking about work and just being present. And there's some tricks that I've applied. I'm ashamed to admit it, but downloading apps that say, I'm going to start this app, and effectively the phone says, if you look at this app, we're growing trees. You're building a forest is what this app does. If you look at the app, the forest starts to wither and die. Put your phone away. Go spend time with your kids, right?
That's great.
So I'm trying to build the Amazon rainforest through this app by not looking at my phone and checking email and checking Teams. But it's a work in progress. I'm getting there. I think one of the other challenges is, as you kind of grow in your career, you tend most times, most people, to accumulate more accountability or responsibility as you age, right? And being a young pup in consulting, being single, allowed me to work extra hours if I needed to work extra hours and dedicate my time to work. Now that I'm a little bit older, I'm in industry, I have a team of dozens of people that I'm accountable for. It's a lot of responsibility and almost like pressure and stress that maybe I didn't have when I was younger in my career. And so with people having kids later in life, I feel like I've hit this point where I have a lot of responsibility I didn't have 5, 7, 10 years ago at work, but I now have this extra responsibility that could be a full-time job at home. And so that's been the challenge the last 2 or 3 years for me to balance. And I'm still working through that. I'm still learning and talking to people and learning every day. What I'm hopeful for as I have girls is I'm told that during the preteen years, things start to get really hectic. And so you have this valley from 5 years old back down, in the preteen years, it's all hands on deck again. Your life's about to get chaotic. So we'll see. There's a lot to love about family and kids, but also add some interesting dynamics that you have to balance with work.
Yeah, no, I know my daughter just turned 11 in March. And so we're absolutely getting to that preteen hands on deck kind of conversation. I will vouch for that assessment. That's good. Let's talk about technology a little bit. A lot of what you work on is identifying and designing for the future for Toyota. What technology is catching your eye right now? What is it that's interesting to you that's coming up in the marketplace?
Yeah, where I specifically reside at Toyota is kind of this interesting growing space of in-vehicle technology and mobile or out-of-vehicle technology. We also kind of concentrate in some areas of our work on mobility solutions. So working with third parties to develop novel ways to transport people. And so there's a couple of things that are just really exciting that not only automotive, but cross over multiple industries. One is AI, right? That's all the rage, right? And we think about, or I think about AI as this really, really interesting frontier that has multiple levels of the stack, right? You have the chips, the NVIDIA H100s, the infrastructure to power AI. You have the middle layer of the models, most famous LLMs, and then you have the application layer on top of that. And I think it's really fascinating to see which OEM and which autonomous vehicle or robotaxi companies are involved in which places in the stack and where the value creation is going to come from. Obviously, a lot of people looking at Tesla as an AI only solution, using camera based to develop some value creation for their business and for their customers. So that's really interesting to pay attention to. On the other hand, you have companies like Waymo and Cruise and Aurora and a bunch of others using a different sensor stack and at different places along the AI kind of value chain. So that's something we're paying attention to, but also from the enterprise perspective, how do we build, AI into the things that we do today that are core to the Toyota's business, right? From people that build things within Toyota to the things that we offer customers, right? A really interesting cross section is voice is becoming a much bigger use case inside the vehicle. So how can AI really supercharge, Mark and Tyler's ability to interact with our vehicle? So that's really interesting. So that's number one. I think really the overall cockpit in the vehicle has always been the place that is continuously improved and it generally improves over time. But now we're on this frontier, and some of the competitors were the first to do this if software-defined vehicles. So instead of updating one particular ECU in the vehicle, and that might be in a limited fashion, now we're going deep into domain controllers, into the electrical platform itself to update powertrain or a body ECU or an ADAS system. And that presents a really kind of unique and interesting mental shift that legacy OEMs have to go through to think about the vehicle, just not the point of sale. How we do cost planning, how we think about value creation over a 10-year period is something that I think we're still wrapping around. I certainly, and what is a real way to harness that enabling technology to drive value for customers over a period of time. And so those are the two that kind of resonate with me the most, that are really exciting, that we'll be spending a lot of time thinking over the coming months and years.
So what do you think, Tyler? Will your daughters ever learn to drive? I'm not sure my daughter will. I'm a teacher because I want her to have the toolkit the same way I learned a manual transmission, but never had to drive one. But I think it might get to a spot where even 5 years from now, my daughter might not have to learn to drive.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So let's say we're 13 to 14 years out. I'm going to say the answer is yes, but I could see a world in which the answer is no. And I think what's going to happen is you're going to see increased levels of autonomy, but we're still going to be in this phase where the human's going to be the fallback, right? Where the system needs to disengage in a certain scenario or a certain operating design domain. You could have still the human in the loop. So there's going to be a need to understand how to operate a vehicle, but I could certainly see scenarios in which that doesn't happen every day and the vehicle is driving itself. And I think we're looking at new vehicles. So there's still going to be millions of vehicles on the road that require a human to be fully 100% present and operating the vehicle. But for your new vehicle sales, if your daughter's driving a new vehicle in 13 years, I could totally see scenarios in which that could be the case. I think it's a coin flip. If I had to bet, there's yes to that question.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'm definitely working towards my daughter having the skill, but not being required. I guess we're seeing where that
Yeah, that's
comes
what
up.
I think I'm answering, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep,
So it's helping her study for the DMV test in parallel park might still be a thing in 13 years, but in
yeah,
25, I'm not sure that it will.
yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Well, along those lines, have you read some of these books right now? I mean, obviously, raising two young children, as a father, we're always worried about how we best prepare them for life, what tools are appropriate. Have you read or heard about the book recently, I think it's The Anxious Generation, and
I
how
have
there's,
heard about this book. I haven't had the pleasure to read it.
yeah, I just downloaded it. I'm going to try to read it. But, the premise, of course, being the damage technology does to our children. So,
Yeah.
I know in my case, we decided to go ahead and let my daughter have a phone pretty early. I'd say probably around 7 years old. We want her to be accessible. And a part of that is a reflection of a two household life for her. We wanted to be able to reach her in both households. What are your thoughts about that as your daughters are coming to an age in the next few years where they'll definitely have the skills? Do you use it to buy yourself time at dinner right now with an iPad, or how does that work for you in the household? And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we have, my wife and I have a strong kind of opinion on this, and not to say that it's right or that if you're a parent doing it a different way that you're in the wrong. It's the way we choose to do it, which is, you know, we firmly believe that our children need to grow the skills, the human interaction skills that are required to make it through adult life, right? And the feeling is that putting a device in front of your child too early could be damaging to that growth, right? We want them to be able to walk up to a guest in our house, look them in the eye, shake their hand, and have an intelligent conversation at some point as they mature, right? And I think putting a phone in front of a child at too young of an age, in our case, our oldest is 3, is not. I guess we want to catch up and talk as a family. We want to enjoy the time together as well. And the fear is putting a phone in front of them at too early an age kind of limits or stunts that social development. And so that's something my wife and I have always aligned on and we feel strongly about. Really, there is no TV in the house. The only time we put a device in front of our child is in dire situations, which is only when we get aboard an airplane. Here's your headphones and here's your pre-downloaded shows and here's your music. But our child, she actually isn't into TV. She loves listening to music. So if we put an iPad in front of her, she's going to go straight to the songs and not to the shows,
Oh,
which
that's
is really
great.
interesting.
So you guys don't have anything you binge? There's no TV you guys binge?
Oh, on our side, oh
Yeah.
well. Now I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. Of course, after the girls are down, right? Um, God, we've been addicted to a show called Slow Horses on Apple TV with Gary
I love that
Oldman.
show. Yes.
Oh my God, it's so great. Those that are listening, like if you love kind of thriller, a little bit of drama, but then dry British humor, which is one of my favorites, it's fantastic. Like it is to me the best show on television right now.
Yeah. No, I've really enjoyed that one too. That was great.
Yeah.
It's good. So what kind of food do you choose? If you and your wife are going to spend some time, like, is it, whether it be more like comfort food or like a dinner out, is there a favorite type, like Italian versus barbecue?
You know what's interesting is so we like all types of food, and I grew up eating the same, let's call it 15 dinners that my father was a stay-at-home dad, so he retired when I was 4 and became Mr. Mom, and my mom had a career of her own and working long hours, so he had to learn how to cook. So we had the same, say, 12 to 15 dinners that just were on constant rotation. 30-minute meals, right, by Rachel Ray. You should be able to prepare, cook, and clean in 30 minutes. Just get the job done. My wife, great cook, has to cook, and her mom is like this as well. My mother-in-law has to cook a new meal almost every night, something she
Wow.
hasn't cooked before. And so and so what that means is we're trying all types of different food every night. The problem becomes when our toddler, right, becomes there. Every child goes through this picky stage of what they like and don't like. Is that's the rub. We're introducing a new meal in front of them that they haven't tried before, and as they get pickier with age, and hopefully they grow out of that, it becomes a little bit of a challenge. But when we go out, we're old fashioned Texas. We go to a Texas brewery is the place we go most. They serve awesome pizza. Like kids are always going to love pizza. and we're gonna have a beer. But we do enjoy some nice dinners from time to time. We're really into to Japanese food. Thai we love. Indian is a go-to staple, but we like the I call it the white boy special, where we ramp the spiciness down to like 0 to 1, and they look at us like we're absolutely crazy. It's like an Indian food, like, but it works for the girls as well.
That's great. No, I agree with you. The one I loved about Dallas was you can get just about any type of food you want, except for authentic Mexican. That's the only thing you can't
True.
find in Texas.
Yeah. And my wife and I, we have this debate, and I don't know where you fall on this, but what is the definition of Tex-Mex versus your point, authentic Mexican? It's all Tex-Mex here, which is a very distinct variation of Americanized Mexican food.
I couldn't agree more. I think the big lesson for me was having spent about 8 years in Dallas and then going to LA. I showed up at the first Mexican food restaurant and asked for queso, and they looked at me funny. They're like, "You
Yeah.
just want cheese?" I'm like, "No, it's cheese with meat, and like you got to put some vegetables in there, and it's gonna be a dip." And they're like, "No, we don't do that."
Yeah. Queso, fajitas, right? Typical Tex-Mex. What I found is you gotta search for the spots, the natives, right? The native Hispanic population visits, right? If
Yeah,
you're going to a place where you see a bunch of people that look like Tyler Brown, you're probably getting Tex-Mex food. Is probably where you are, right?
agreed. Agreed.
You got to follow the locals, right? They know
Yeah,
where the good stuff is.
yeah, absolutely. Well, hey Tyler, I really appreciate the time today. Any parting thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I appreciate you having me. Thanks as always. I think it's a really, really interesting year with the technology advances that are being made and AI and other spaces. It's certainly a big year for Toyota. We have the election this year, the Olympics over the summer. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to what this year brings. And it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Tyler. Well, thank you for making the time today.
All right. Talk soon. Thank you. Bye.